After a very challenging year and a half for home buyers, there's a glimmer of hope. Interest rates have more than doubled in the past year and a half. Sales are down for the first time in years, and that's leading to some openings for some buyers, maybe. Jayati Ramakrishnan covers housing and transportation issues for the Oregonian and Oregon Live, and she's here to help make sense of all of this. Jayati, thanks for coming back on the show.
Thanks for having me.
So, Jayati, just how long has it been since home sales and prices went down at all in Portland?
It's a little complicated, like everything. There's not a simple answer, but year over year, prices this December were down. So compared to last December, median home prices actually went down. And we haven't seen that since 2019. January of 2019 was the last time I think that year over year prices dropped. And before that, we hadn't seen that since 2012.
Wow.
And so it is unusual to see prices actually going down. It's not like a huge drop or anything. I don't think potential home buyers should be looking for Great Recession era prices yet. But it did offer a little bit of optimism for some people who've maybe been in the market for a long time and not finding a lot of success.
Okay, so that makes sense that this is a muddy picture like it's across the economy right now. You went out and talked to people on all sides of the equation. People are trying to buy, brokers, everyone. Can you tell us about the DeYoung family and their situation?
Yeah, so I spoke to a couple, the DeYoungs, who are currently living in DC, but one of them is from Portland. And so they're trying to move back here. And so earlier in 2022, they thought they were in a good spot. They had gotten pre-approved for a loan. They found a house that they really liked. And then interest rates spiked, and that kind of cut their buying power. And so they decided to wait. And they've continued to look. They have some family here who've kind of helped them by visiting some prospective homes, checking them out. As you can imagine, it's probably hard to look for a home remotely. Exactly. And so they are just waiting it out right now. So they are still hoping to move back here and, maybe stay with family and continue their search. But yeah, that spike in interest rates really kind of changed their plans.
So when you were talking to them, they kind of laid out how, anytime you're trying to buy a house, there's trade-offs that you have to make. But they were finding that maybe they didn't have as much buying power as they did thanks to the interest rates.
Right. Yeah. And as far as trade-offs, that's something I've heard a lot in the past few months talking to people, which is that, either you have a perfect location and something in the house has to give, or the house is exactly what you want, but it's maybe farther out than you were hoping to live, or, not in the city that you want to be in. So yeah, for the amount of money that most people that I've talked to are looking to spend, something has to give.
So how long are homes staying on the market in Portland? I know back, in 2020, 2021, it seemed like they were just flying in the matter of days.
Yeah. And that's one of the things that has slowed down a little bit. So yeah, earlier in 2022, late 2021, people were putting offers on homes in droves. Sellers would get 20 to 30 offers on a home. They would put a home on the market, and in a weekend it'd be sold. And that's not happening as much anymore. So you're seeing homes staying on the market for a couple of months. And that does offer buyers a little bit more power or opportunity to negotiate. And so what I'm hearing from brokers is that, buyers may be able to say, okay, I want you to cover to the seller. I want you to cover closing costs, or, they may be able to get a little bit more for their money. And sellers in turn are trying to do a little bit more to incentivize buyers. Whereas several months ago, a year ago, they didn't have to do that because there were so many people putting in offers.
Yeah. So what kind of things can be done, I guess, to incentivize buyers? I guess you mentioned the closing cost piece, which can be a lot of money depending on the
Yeah.
value of the home.
Yeah, like I said, closing costs is a big one. And then repairs is another one, like if there's something wrong with the home, or something like that, the seller may be more inclined to fix that before the buyer moves in. Yeah, those are kind of the two big ones, I would say.
Yeah, because if you go back to the crazy frenetic times of late 2021, early 2022, before the interest rates went up, basically, a lot of people were having to buy homes as is, right?
Yeah, I would say that it's been interesting. Like some buyers are still looking to move right in and maybe take what they can get, but yeah, there's a little bit more flexibility, I think, on buyers' side now.
Okay. So, what else are you hearing from brokers? I mean, obviously, they're not as busy as they were previously. So, I imagine that's hurting their pocketbooks.
I think they're still pretty busy. The brokers that I talked to said that this is sort of a return. They were optimistic. They said this is a sort of returning to a more balanced market after the craziness of the last couple of years. And some indicated that this is like a good thing. It's sort of necessary. And so, yeah, what I've heard is that, like we talked about, buyers have a little more power, but it's not something where it's flipped to being what you would call a buyer's market, because sellers become buyers. And so when someone sells a home, they're in the market too. And with interest rates the way they are, some sellers may decide, okay, I'm going to wait, because they might lose their power, if they get back on the market. And there might not be a lot of good options out there if everyone decides to re-enter the market at the same time. So it's it's a little bit of a dance. It's still a challenging time out there.
Yeah, and it's not the type of dancer where they're bumping Miley Cyrus or things of that nature,
exactly.
Right? So
the other thing I would say, sorry to interrupt you. One of the brokers I talked to also said on the topic of pricing, prices may not be plummeting like one might, like a buyer might hope,
Right.
but she predicted that there might be sort of a deceleration in how much prices are going up, whereas in the past couple of years they were just, it was like this. It was just like skyrocketing every month. And she predicted kind of a slowdown in that.
Okay. So, we're obviously talking in late January at this point. This is not typically the hot time in the housing market. What are people thinking, of the spring and summer? Is there a sense of this will carry on, or kind of wait and see? What's the feeling?
Yeah. I mean, the housing market is so seasonal, but I spoke to an economist and he was like, it's really hard to predict. This is an unusually difficult market to forecast. And so whether this, month to month decline that we've been seeing, kind of incrementally prices have gone down a little bit, but it's not clear if that's going to become a longer term trend. We don't know at this point.
So higher interest rates, obviously they affect all sectors of the economy. If you're trying to buy a car, if checking accounts, to the extent that people have checking accounts with interest anymore, savings accounts. But what other effects can higher interest rates have in the housing market?
Yeah. So of course, higher interest rates mean your mortgage payments are going to be a lot higher. And so a dip in median home prices may not mean all that much. If interest rates are at 6% or something, that's not necessarily good news for buyers. And the other thing, speaking to this economist that I heard, is that it could potentially slow down construction rates. So right now there's underproduction of housing. And so if people, slow down on the buyer's side, developers may slow down as well, because there's not as many, people buying up. So it remains to be seen, but that's another possibility.
Okay. So there might be, not as many options on the market in terms of new construction in general because of the broader economic trends.
That's right. Yeah.
Okay. So you talked to other folks for your recent story. Can you talk about the McAuliffe family? What's their story?
Yeah, so I talked to a young woman, Haley McAuliffe, who was purchasing her first home, and she's about to close on it at the end of this month. And so the home, the seller was asking close to $400,000. She and her partner came in at an offer significantly lower than that, and it was accepted. And, a few months ago, that wouldn't have happened. And it was on the market for about a month and a half. It was one of those homes where you can move in right away, a turnkey property. And what she told me is that she was kind of surprised. She didn't have a lot of competition. She was expecting kind of a lot more offers on that home, and their offer was accepted. And yeah, that's something that, you wouldn't have probably heard that story 6 months ago.
Is that more of a factor given the price point of the house, or kind of the larger market symptoms, I guess, when you talk to people about it?
The price point of that house was a bit lower than average. But it's hard to say. One of the other things she said was that, we talked about this before, but there's some give and take, and they didn't get a lot of what they wanted. Their priority was a big backyard, and they got that. But she admitted, it's a tiny house. It's there's not a lot of extra space. It wasn't in their ideal location. So I think it might have to do more with those factors, that it was, it was in their price range, but there's a lot that they had to compromise on too.
What other economic factors may be at play for people who are trying to buy a home right now? Maybe first-time buyers too, in particular.
Yeah. So for a lot of people, having some kind of outside support is a deciding factor. So for the McAuliffes that I just mentioned, they got a down payment grant from the Portland Housing Center. That's something that's available to people. There's assistance out there, and that's really helpful for a lot of folks. Other people get help from family, and that can be the deciding factor as well. I talked to another woman who had been putting money towards her down payment. That it was early in the pandemic, student loans went into forbearance. And so instead she started putting that money that would have gone to student loans towards a down payment. But it still didn't become a reality that she could start looking for a home until her partner's family members decided to chip in. And, there's data out there that suggests that that's pretty common. Having assistance from family or friends is really the deciding factor in whether a lot of people can buy a home or not.
And the student loan issue, obviously, for years, there might have been people who weren't making payments on their loan. Maybe they were making a decision to try to build a little bit of a nest egg, to the extent you can call it a nest egg, to help buy a home during that market.
Right. I would say that also, we kind of touched on this, but this concept of generational wealth is a big factor. Yeah. One of the brokers I talked to, Javier Alomia, he does a lot of work with Hacienda CDC. And he mentioned that a lot of the people who get priced out of the area are people of color or low-income residents who would be first-time home buyers. But with this market, it's just not a reality.
Well, it's a really interesting look at the market right now. What else are you tracking, or have you reported on recently that, I should have asked you about in this space that listeners might want to know about?
Right now, I'm working on a story taking a closer look at Governor Kotek's housing plan, the plan to build 36,000 new units a year. So stay tuned for that sometime in the next week or so. And then, a couple of weeks ago, I had a story about there's a lot going on with, renters as well. And still, as challenging as it is to be a prospective buyer right now, renting is a hot topic. So just this month, the state rent cap went up to 14.6%. And that's a big concern for a lot of people. And yeah, there's a lot of challenges that renters are facing. A story I wrote in December was about how some landlords were refusing to accept state rental assistance. So even though tenants had the money, landlord said no, and that led to evictions for quite a few people as well. So keeping an eye on those things. And it's a tough time out there.
Yeah, no, I'm glad you mentioned the renters assistance program because you've been reporting on that for a long time. And it seems like maybe we're entering a new era where some of those pandemic related protections are not as robust as they used to be, or like you said, aren't being recognized, right?
Pretty much. I mean, and actually pandemic era protections are gone. Like there's still renter assistance out there, but that story was looking at tenants who had experienced that several months ago. So at this point, there's no more pandemic era renter protections. And that adds another layer of challenges for renters too.
So to put a finer point on it, that when you talk about the cap of 14%, explain that for people who might not be as aware.
Yeah. So in, I think 2019, the Oregon legislature passed a rent control law. So landlords can raise the rent up to a certain amount, and that's it's tied to inflation. Mm-hmm. And so last year, I think it was 9.9%. This year, because of inflation, landlords can raise the rent on apartments older than 15 years.
Okay.
It doesn't apply to newer units. So that's another challenge. But for apartments 15 years and older, landlords can raise the rent up to 14.6%. And that's a huge problem. That's a lot of money. And so there are several groups right now that are pushing for a limit to how much rent can be raised. So I think there's a bill coming in the legislature this year. But yeah, it stems from a rent control law, but when it's tied to inflation, that can get out of hand as well.
Yeah, exactly. We were kind of in uncharted territory on that front. And you mentioned it doesn't apply to new construction. Mm-hmm. So translation meaning if you live in an apartment built 2 or 3 years ago and you have a 1-year lease, when that lease is up, rents can go up however much.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. What else would you want me to ask, or should I have asked you? I appreciate you carving out of time on a Friday.
I'm trying to think. I think that's what I got for now. So I hope that fills enough time for you.
Absolutely. We'll share some links in the episode notes for all of your coverage. We didn't even talk about transportation. That felt like that might be a little bit of a zag on this specific episode, but
yeah, I can come back.
Yeah, exactly. There's lots we can talk about there. The Interstate Bridge project, pedestrian fatalities you've reported on recently, all kinds of stuff. So thanks for listening to Beat Check with the Oregonian. If you like the show, give us a 5-star rating and review in Apple Podcasts. Make sure to tell a friend, spread the word. I will share those links to Jayati's excellent reporting in the episode notes. And until next time.